everyone, it's Crimson Glow here, and I'm just letting you know that if you're at all interested in funding my efforts into making these videos while at the same time getting stuff like work in progress art before I post them on Twitter, sneak peeks to the next video, and Patreon exclusive polls, which can only happen if there's more than 1 or 2 patrons, look down in the description below for a link to my Patreon. Thank you for supporting my efforts into making these videos fun and informative for all of you. Without you, I'm not able to make content possible. So, I hope you enjoy the show. So, here's something that you don't know about me. My mom is sort of like a lifestyle coach for military families. So, growing up, she'd give me books about how to live my life. 7 Habits of Effective Teens? I read it. The entire collection of the American Girl guides to everything from love to money? I had it, and I read them like 4 times. 5 Love Languages? I never actually read the book, but I went to the sessions about it. And at the time, they were... I didn't really pay much mind to them as a kid, but as an adult, I was able to recognize them much more, and as much to my mother's ego, they helped. You hear that? They helped! Put that in your classes! That's not to say that this topic hasn't been something of conversation before, as it was first published in the 90s, back when mainstream people were starting to positively categorize themselves with phrases like alpha male, or my zodiac sign is, or I'm totally an introvert. No, I'm totally an extrovert! Though, to be fair, this one has more anthropological science that's actually behind it, and it has changed over time. The basic gist being that people in a relationship, whether platonic or romantic, have usually 5 different ways of expressing their appreciation or their affection. So to help me on this, in writing at least, is my mom, who for security reasons we will call Morning Glory. She has taught it for years, and I thought that she might be able to pull out her own know-how on this video, because I don't like doing research. The basic general languages that we're covering today are physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, and finally, receiving gifts.
Everybody got that?
Now the question is, how can you involve this when you're looking into things like a book, a cartoon, a TV show, comics, or even your own writing? Well, simply put, you're basically going to look at a few things that a character has gone through in their lives. Examples may include society that they grew up in, the family style that they had, or just generally who they are as a person. Granted, no one is usually just one of these things. There's a lot of different aspects to a relationship with characters that are involved, and it's really hard to just say that it's just for them expressing their love or receiving it, and that's a different video for a different time. Now let's start pointing out a few prime examples of negatives and positives and misconceptions that characters have for each and every one of these love languages, starting with physical touch.
Oh my.
Characters with this love language tend to just like touching in general. They love holding hands, they snuggle, they kiss, they have a firm grasp on assets.
Huge tracts of land.
All that PDA stuff you were taught was really inappropriate, but no one really cared, excluding people that were usually not only 2 years into their relationship.
Tommy, your mum's there. God's sake, man.
Though this is a video to show you that that's not always the case, and to start with the best example I could think of for physical touch, that's Garnet.
This is Garnet, back together.
It's a little hard to say that Garnet from Steven Universe is a physical love language couple, but honestly I didn't find any better relationship with all the factors and positive attributes of a physical relationship because, well, you know, they're usually one frickin' person. They're almost never apart, and even when they're finally separated as Ruby and Sapphire, they are probably the most flirtatious couple you could possibly find.
Now what you want to do is lead with your hips. Yeah, that's pretty good. Oh, let me show you again.
The only time where they aren't touching or together is when they're having trouble with their relationship, or when they're just upset and they simply can't take the support of their significant other at the moment.
If you're not going to listen, then you can just go!
We must move past this, Ruby.
But why is that? Well, other fusions being a very, well, physical thing, we also have to look at the backstories of each character. Rubies are supposed to be drone guards, meant to do things that are very physical, and therefore tend to fuse together as a means to accomplish a goal. Sapphires, while we've only really seen two, are supposed to be distant and cold, focusing on their future vision.
I foresee the rebels attacking the Cloud Arena. Before they are cornered, they will destroy the physical forms of 7 gems, including 2 of my Ruby guards and myself.
It's also shown that Gem World itself is a distinctly cold and distant place, where you're not meant to feel or explore through creative means. This instills in us, as the audience, why Garnet's physical connection is supposed to be so important. This is also a really good way to show how different people show the same love language, but they come from different backgrounds. It makes sense because Sapphire isn't supposed to feel, as she's being introduced to something very new, very interesting. It's something that she never thought she could have. A feeling, emotion. While Ruby has done nothing but feel, so now gets to explore this new adventure with Sapphire.
I've never had a third eye before.
I've never had more than one. It was nice.
If you want the option of a bad physical touch relationship, look at Malachite from the same show, Steven Universe. Malachite, being the fusion of Jasper and Lapis Lazuli, is an incredibly unhealthy and unstable relationship. Them constantly being together actually drains them of their connection as individuals as well as being a couple, or a fusion as it were. And because of that, it's abusive on both sides. Lapis, because she feels that she has to keep things in order as one person to keep it at bay, while Jasper is desperately trying to get out. There's a lot of heavy symbolism here of a foil for Garnet's relationship, which is balanced and healthy, while Malachite's is clearly unhealthy and unbalanced.
It'll be better this time. I've changed. You've changed me.
But then what about a pairing or a character that has physical touch as a thing, but it's written really badly?
Oh my gosh, we've been tying up the hotline, haven't we?
No. Well, yeah, but that's okay.
Miss Keen and Professor Utonium from the Powerpuff Girls. Yeah, that one was just... It didn't make any gosh darn sense. So the episode has these two go on a date, something that's happened to Utonium before, and it didn't end well. At all. That guy can't catch a break, Jesus. They suddenly go into each other's arm and supposedly hit with love poison because they got touched by each other. It's curtains for both characters. The problem being that this doesn't make sense as far as the professor is concerned. A lot of Utonium's behavior when it comes to relationships, whether romantic or platonic before this, usually had a lot to do with acts of service and words of affirmation. The same thing can be said with Miss Keen, as far as we know with her as a teacher. But for the sole reason that they touched that one time, suddenly they're in a relationship. And not a very good one either. They break up because...
Don't you like cats?
Well, I had a really bad experience with a cat once.
Well, it couldn't have been that bad.
It made me jump off a building.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
What? You don't believe me?
The reason why this is bad writing is because we have no basis other than this one episode that this is their love language. They act completely out of character while in the relationship, and then they break up for no real reason or communication afterwards. It's dumb. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean there are only two ways of using physical touch. Poison Ivy and Sedusa are also really great ways of using this to their advantage in evil plots, either by using their bodies to seduce, or using some other physical means to hypnotize people. Another way that you can look at it is when a hero goes up to a villain who's just really sad and needs a hug. When that dramatic scene happens, it usually means that there's no other physical or mental way to beat this bad guy in any violent or negative way, or the hero is just out of control and under somebody else's control, except the power of love and friendship will always bring them towards the light. Or you just stab them. That works too. Wow, that was a lot. How many more do we have to do here? 4? Ah, fuck.
Be more specific, yes, I'm here to listen.
Tell me what you love about me. Everything. No, but what do you love about me? Everything. Specifically, what do you love about me?
I don't know, bitch, you smile!
Words of affirmation, it's not necessarily something like, oh my god, you're like the best at everything. Oh my god, like everything about you is perfect. Nothing's wrong with you. Shut up and talk to those haters and tell them to go fuck themselves. It's more like things like, hey, you're doing great. You've done so well so far. I love you. Don't worry about it. It's gonna be okay. Simple things like that can be just as effective as any grand gesture. The best character that I could see both the positives and the negatives of this particular love language was Pearl from Steven Universe. I promise this is the last character I'm using from Steven Universe, I swear.
You're lying to me!
Spoilers to anyone who has not seen the latest of the show. Pearl is a traditional mother role in Steven's life, and has grown up or really been designed to be nothing more than a secretary, an assistant, a caretaker, with no autonomy of her own. That is, until becoming Pink Diamond's Pearl, where she is verbally appreciated and she responds really well to it. She becomes more faithful to Pink Diamond even when becoming Rose Quartz, because a few things like how verbally supportive Rose is to her and how encouraging she is really help to solidify her confidence.
Did Rose make you feel like you were nothing?
Rose made me feel like I was everything.
The problem, though, is that she doesn't feel that way about her own self-worth, without reassurance from other people. Pearl ultimately feels that this is a lack of autonomy, and she doesn't really get over it until some of the present events of the show. This constantly is pointed out again and again as Pearl struggles to deal with it. And that's really great, because with this, we're able to point out and regularly show that this is a struggle for her, and it's something that she's able to work through. Much like how Sapphire was first experiencing physical touch as a love language, it wasn't until Rose came into Pearl's life when she finally realized that Pearl really liked verbally being appreciated in order to feel loved.
I imagined that I ran away and met you here on Earth. A Rose Quartz. And I'm not yours, but I make you so happy anyway. Isn't that ridiculous? Tell me to stop. Please don't ever stop.
To add to that, as established before, Gem World is a very unfeeling autocratic society, where you are made to do one thing, and you shouldn't be expected a thank you. You should be expected that you did your job, or be shattered for being different. For an example of words of affirmation written badly, I would like to point you to Rainbow Dash from My Little Pony, specifically the episode Mysterious Mare Duel. In that episode, words of affirmation seem to be the only way that Dash can survive. She gets so into it that she starts becoming the one who causes all the issues. This is not a healthy way to portray this character, and it would end up haunting the writers later in Tanks for the Memories. You can also use this in other ways, like say your protagonist compliments a different character, whether it's platonic or romantic, as they fight. Sometimes the character doesn't really respond well to words of affirmation, like a confident person, and takes it shyly, or they lash out because they don't believe that it's sincere, which is where tsunderes probably come from.
ねえ、シンジ、キスしようか。
何？
キスよ、キス。したことないでしょ？
うん。
じゃあしよう。
どうして？
退屈だからよ。
退屈だからって。
There is also playing with the idea of maybe somebody's ego's involved, where maybe a villain might be trying to get a power edge playing up someone's ego, or they use words of affirmation that would be otherwise complimentary, but then they turn around the dialogue a bit so that the protagonist feels inadequate about themselves instead. Only to figure out that the antagonist isn't really where he wants these words to come from anyway.
Ever since I've known you, you've been searching for a life greater than that of an ordinary Jedi. A life of significance, of conscience.
Colonel Neil, what the hell are you doing? In the middle of my backswing?
Then there's quality time, which is pretty self-explanatory, that being that you like it when you just kind of hang out. This is one of the more common love languages of most relationships, whether you're romantic or platonic. These people tend to like spending time together and do a lot of stuff together, whether it be sleeping in bed or going to Disneyland! Which is why I thought I'd focus on a really great show called Kim Possible, specifically the main leads, Kim and Ron. Kim and Ron are probably one of the best examples of being plainly platonic to romantically involved with the power of quality time. A lot of other factors were involved, but we're just focusing on this one. Their relationship is basically based on the fact that they spend so much meaningful time together despite being completely different people. Ron being more into the Nako and working at Smarty Mart, and with the added bonus of being considered a loser, though nowadays he'd be considered at least a 7.5, while Kim Possible is hot, popular, and an overachieving chick who happens to be a spy. It's not really clear what she is, but she's very spy-like.
So you're a bounty hunter?
That ain't it at all.
Then what are you?
I'm a bounty hunter.
These two people, whom if meeting in any other grade other than pre-K probably wouldn't be in the same social circle, let alone be the same characters, have such a strong connection with one another, and that you can't really see Kim without Ron and vice versa, which is what the writers of the show even played at in the very first movie, A Stitch in Time. In that movie, Ron and Kim are separated because Ron has to move to Norway, because of course it's Norway. It's always Norway. Why? I don't know.
You're supposed to be in Switzerland, you little son of a bitch!
My father!
Did you get kicked out of another boarding school? Damn it, Lorraine, do you know how much perfectly good dough I've blown on this no-good kid of yours, huh?
And we see both of them struggle with this. Even as Kim has Monique, though one of the only female friends that Kim has, who's trying to do her best Ron impression to keep Kim happy, it just doesn't feel right. The reason being is because, like every language, it has a dialect. Kim and Monique's quality time language is all about energetically talking about fashion and talking about boys and shopping together, which fulfills part of Kim that she really needed. While Ron was meant to be more of a relaxed and more generalized side of Kim, talking about things outside of school and work, and maybe inside of working at school activities. A negative way to portray this could be with Jasper and Lapis, and how they're constantly in each other's company, but it's clearly not by choice. I know I said I wasn't going to use another Steven Universe pairing, but here we go. Where Jasper is the one being abused by Lapis because, well, she's not letting go, even cluing in that Lapis did a lot more to her, even things that Lapis is scared to talk about. This is another way to make the relationship toxic without making your relationship out of character.
I was terrible to you. I liked taking everything out on you. I needed to. I hated you. It was bad.
However, a bad way of looking at this quality time is probably going to come from Mako and Korra, from Legend of Korra. Mako and Korra really didn't have that much chemistry and really didn't have that much in terms of things in common, and they only really hung out during training sessions, spying, and bending sports. While yeah, every once in a while they would hang around each other, it felt forced because their quality time was never feeling genuine or earned. Mako then feels like an asshole at the end of the relationship, even though their breakup was mutual for, well, many reasons.
Mommy, but then Korra came back and thought you guys were still together and you didn't tell her you weren't?
Just like your grandfather.
Well, me and Asami were never officially back together.
Really?
I suppose a way to twist this is to use a different dialect for this love language. Like I said, there's no one way to have a love language. Just because you have characters who spend time together, that doesn't mean that they're in a relationship, nor does it mean they're even friends, which actually could be very interesting to go into. Here's an example. In an RP that I'm doing with a friend of mine, two characters in an alternate reality actually did have a very romantic coupling together. But due to reboot events, neither one of them remembered that relationship except for two zany Discord and Pinkie Pie-like characters who tried to set them up. They spend time together and understand that this is a blind date, but they themselves don't feel that connection. They both spent time together, but due to other factors in their lives, like background, social class, and interests, they don't feel that romantically connected to each other. Maybe they can be platonic, but otherwise they can't really go back to what they were. It was interesting because to us, we know that they had chemistry, we know that they had a complicated history, a healthy relationship. But because we know that they are in a new place with no remnants of their past life, they choose only to stay friends.
Guest, be our guest, put our service to the test.
Would you like some tea?
Okay. What's your game?
I offered you tea.
After inviting me into your shuttle of your own free will, which makes 2 events without precedent, which makes me more than a little skittish.
Acts of service then comes in with the fact that you just like it when people do things for you, or vice versa. You like it when someone does the dishes every once in a while. You like it when people cook for you, or maybe you like to cook for the person you care about, or maybe you just like getting gifts, and sometimes people like giving gifts. It's kind of hard to define, it takes a lot of forms, and it kind of gets rearranged with receiving gifts. It's weird.
It's good.
Really?
To which I now point you to My Little Pony Friendship is Magic for a positive and not so positive light on Rarity. Rarity comes across as someone who likes things done for her, but primarily likes to do things for others. She's the element of generosity after all, so of course acts of service apply to a lot of the things that she's done. This can be seen in episodes like Dress for Success, where Rarity offers to make the rest of the main 6 gala garments. For generosity, right? Though, personally, I think there's a little bit of ego there. In Rarity Takes Manhattan, she gives a full loom of fabric to a competitor as an accent to help equalize their fashion line. Or the time that from the very beginning, Rarity gives her tail to Stephen Magnus because of how important she knows that looks can be to people, which that generosity is then reflected later in Slice of Life, when Magnus does the very same to Cranky. It's important to note these because while the very act of expressing Rarity's creative side is definitely a factor here, the acts that she does still show her generous nature. Even when she sees the errors of her ways in Sisterhood Social, when it does happen, she makes a conscious effort to be a better sister for Sweetie Belle. Though it's not always sunshine and rainbows when it comes to acts of service. In Dress for Success, Rarity's kindness feels taken advantage of by the rest of the main 6 because they keep changing and reshaping the vision that Rarity made. Because Rarity didn't speak up in the first place, this ends up with her hiding away from the rest of the main 6 and the rest of the main 6 being, well, silly.
Things look like a piled-on mishmash of everything but the kitchen sink.
That's not to say that these are necessarily bad things to add to a character. They can round a character out so they aren't just so sweet and innocent and they didn't know any better. Having characters with an ego attached to this love language like Rarity can make a character feel more rounded and like their own person. Adding flaws that attach to this kind of love language can be a lot of fun. For example, say that you want an abusive character. The problem is that you may not be really good with physical abuse, either for personal reason or otherwise. Why not have this abuser character use acts of service for another character, but constantly guilts that character into doing things that they don't want to do, but they do anyway. And why is this? Because the victim character feels that they owe them.
Not even for my father. The man who made it possible for you to enter Starfleet Academy.
Oh no, that's not fair.
The man who believed in you when no one else would.
Oh, this is so low.
I can't believe you'd rather keep your filthy money locked up in a box under a bed than use it to give him endless moments of happiness.
Ah! All right. I'll do it.
That's very generous of you, Nog. I'm proud of you.
Just like I said with physical touch, you have to look at the backgrounds of characters to see this particular love language, and Rarity is a really good example of this. We see her parents, and we see her backstory, and we know that she loves the attention that her clothes get, and how happy that makes other ponies. To add to that, her parents are usually absent, but they're not cruel. If anything, they just seem to like things being done for them, and that could explain a lot with Rarity as an adult. And then there's maybe how not to write this love language, to which I point to the CMC. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the CMC. The CMC have grown really well as characters, and I'm excited how they're going to move in the next season. But it wasn't always like that. They love doing acts of service, in part because, you know, it's the CMC. They do a lot of acts of service. Though when it comes to romance and Big Mac, they kind of fall pretty flat. Most of the time forcing their acts of service on him in a way that's, well, they might think is a good thing, but then it just ends up really, really bad. Like in the very first Hearts and Hooves Day episode, where they think that, you know, why don't we have them drink a love poison? Even though they think it's a love potion at first, but it's still a love poison, so my point still stands. The problem being that you can't have characters just constantly force themselves into things that they can't control, or things that they simply don't know much about.
Great! We've not only turned Big Mac and Miss Cheerily into a couple of nonsense-spouting nincompoops, we may have put all of Ponyville in jeopardy!
You can have characters like this, but much like the CMC, they have to learn from their mistakes. Sure, they might fumble a bit, but they shouldn't have to keep making the same mistake over and over again. Something that the CMC have done several times, at least when they found out that Big Mac had a crush on Sugar Belle. This does also show how different dialects work for acts of service. With Rarity, they are more physical things that are given to others, and she knows that she needs them, while the CMC come with helpful advice. That's not necessarily great, but they tried their best to make it work, and in other episodes it probably would work. Even Big Mac has a tendency to do this, as he's avidly trying to do things for people he cares about, whether it's Apple Bloom or Sugar Belle.
You gave me the perfect gift.
Is the jar of dirt going to help?
If you don't want it, give it back.
No.
Then it helps.
And now let's talk about the most complicated of them all, and maybe the least desirable of them all. Even to the point where, as far as I could look up, this love language is shown to be mostly towards villain characters who constantly get their way. I am, of course, talking about receiving gifts. Please keep in mind that there are different dialects for every love language, as was stated before. For example, someone might think of doing things for someone as acts of service, while the other could be receiving gifts. The other could be a gift of self, where they just like hanging out with that person, which could be considered quality time, but could also be considered receiving gifts. That's why this one is so complicated.
It proves we can't ever really know what's going on.
The way I understand it, though, is this. You feel the most love when someone gets you something, and that lets you know that they listen, pay attention, or that they care about you. It doesn't have to be expensive or extravagant. For example, you could be talking about how you love Norse mythology, and so someone gets you an audiobook about how Thor got into a dress that one time. Or maybe you have somebody that you care about who loves homemade DIY stuff, so you make something. It's definitely not something that's the most desired. Hell, another person wrote a different explanation where it simply meant that you liked getting things for the sake of getting things, which I did talk to Morning Glory about, and she did say that both were correct in that they were both different dialects of the same language. But here's the problem that I had with this love language, or at least with the way that it's portrayed in media. It's usually a way to show a brat or spoiled character. I mean, it's really hard to find a positive version of this love language because there's so many villain characters in animation with this as their gimmick.
How many are there?
36. Counted them myself.
36! But last year I had 37!
Yes, well, some of them are quite a bit bigger than last year.
I don't care how big they are!
An example can be found in Princess Morbucks from the original Powerpuff Girls TV show, who was simply a brat who was given everything she could ever want, with a father who would do anything she ever wanted to get her to go away. Another example could be Kitty from the Teen Titans show, who was very similar to Princess in that she got everything she could ever want, but it wasn't limited to just items. It was often people, too, making her father, Killer Moth, get Robin as her date to prom.
The city will declare me ruler, the Teen Titans will surrender, and Robin will take this lovely young lady to her junior prom.
Hi, Robbie Pooh.
The closest positive I could find for this love language was May from Avatar: The Last Airbender. If anybody is a little hazy on the details, here's the skinny. May is the canon girlfriend of Zuko, who were in a shaky relationship, I guess, kind of.
I don't hate you.
I don't hate you too.
I mean, they broke up like twice in the show, and then they broke it off in the comics, though there are some people who think that they ended up getting married and having Fire Lord Izumi. So far, there's supposed to be an interview that says this. I don't know where it is. It's hard to find this source. May was someone who constantly liked things being given to her, and while yeah, that's part of the pattern that we're seeing, what constantly bothered me about it was that it always felt like it was just given on her terms. It seemed like she was only asking for it because she's the girlfriend of the Fire Lord Prince. Well, I guess she gets everything. It took me going to my favorite live-action crime show in order to find a character who was a prime example of receiving gifts and wasn't bratty or selfish. I mean, you could consider this character selfish, but not in a horrible way. I now show you Miss Angela Montenegro from Bones, a crime show about a forensic anthropologist and her partner from the FBI solving crime using bones, brains, and heart. It was so sad when it ended. It was so sad. I was so sad. Why is it gone? It's such a good show. Highly recommended if you can find it on Prime. Bones, the main character, also not her real name, it's a nickname, but we're going for it, has a best friend in the form of Angela Montenegro. She's carefree, wild, artistic, brash, unapologetic about everything that she does and how she just loves to do it. She eventually then marries the bug guy of the lab group, Hodgins, who's filthy stinking rich and totally madly in love with her. But here's the thing about their romantic history. It's complicated. She had rejected his proposal twice because it wasn't magical enough, not because of the ring that wasn't great. In fact, she said simply that it was amazing, but that the moment it wasn't right. And then she ended up asking him to marry her after he spelt "I love you" in glowing letters made out of seafood. A bit of time before that, she had gone out with a woman who she knew from college and fell in love all over again when she finally saw this painting of Angela after all these years. She definitely looks at these gifts as things that actually mean something emotional, but then she rejects the norm. She likes getting gifts, but they usually have to mean something. This then shows up in another episode seasons later, where Hodgins is trying to get a very pregnant Angela a gift for Valentine's Day. And every single gift that he shows up is rejected not by Angela, by all their mutual friends and colleagues, saying that it doesn't mean enough or that Hodgins just hasn't been paying attention. The person that rejected his first idea was like, "Your lab is freaking beautiful, man. Can't you just make something out of all this stuff?" Finally, Hodgins makes a slime mold that smells like roses and names it after Angela, and she nearly cries. And that's what I really mean when I say that there's a dialect for these things. Angela is a great character with this particular love language, and you can do so much with her. But it's really sad that this is the one I'm more disliked of the love languages, and it's reserved mostly for villains. Of course, these aren't the only ways to portray these love languages, and I do encourage you, make them different, research them, because people are different. You can make a character who gives love differently than he gets it. For example, Rarity loves doing acts of service, but she clearly loves to receive words of affirmation. Beast needs words of affirmation and receiving gifts, or maybe even quality time in order to break out of his shell with Belle. Lance from Voltron needs words of affirmation from Allura in order to fight in the Red Lion, but Allura needs quality time in order to feel romantically loved. People are different, and they give and receive their affections in different ways. So this is my question to you. What's your love language? Do you have more than one? What's your favorite ship's love language, and how do you think they mesh together in their canon, if they were canon? Tell me all about it in the comments below. This has been your future evil overlord, Crimson Glow, and keep loving, whether it's platonic or romantic.
When I see the way you act, wondering when I'm coming back, I could do about anything. I could even learn how to love like you.
Comics go from the 19s, so that's the joke.
I miss you so much.